Chelsey, welcome to A Man in His Face. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining me. Where are you joining us from today?
I am located in southern Alberta, Canada.
Nice. Bit cooler up there, I imagine, at the moment.
Actually, I have sunburn. We got our first decent day of sun yesterday. So, yeah, I have already burnt myself. And oh, yeah, starting tanning season off with a bang.
Yeah, how's the pollen up there? Pollen down here is awful.
Just starting. My oldest daughter gets a little bit of it, and she's just starting to get runny nose. So, it's coming. It's coming.
So, for those who may not know you, you are what I would call an Instagram star. You share such amazing messages. I love your videos. I love the content you make. For those who may not know your story, who is Chelsey Pete?
Chelsey Pete is a lovely individual who was born with a rare condition known as Sturge-Weber syndrome. The condition itself happens about 1 in 50,000, but of those 50,000, or 1 in 50,000, many times they are taken too soon or too early due to the complexity of the condition. It can affect systems like the brain, even the heart, strangely enough, but more commonly seizure activity because of all the extra blood vessels and things. But I am a advocate. I am an author. I am a mother, a wife, a dog owner. Heads up if my dog barks. I am social media, trying to keep up with all the new age technology, and a community member of a wonderful community, the Facial Differences community. So I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we'll start from the beginning. Growing up, childhood,
Mm.
teenage years, how
Mm.
was that for you?
Depended on the day. Um, Childhood was okay. I mean, as okay as it can be for someone who's different. I mean, us growing up in the 80s, we had all the Sesame Street songs. One of these things doesn't look like the other. One of these things doesn't belong. Well, you basically taught a generation that anyone who doesn't fit that cookie cutter automatically isn't equal. So, because of that, many of us had to face that shadowy existence where we didn't fit in the circles. So, for me, it was a lot of struggling because I didn't have the friends or the network or the connection capabilities. Same with teen years. I mean, I can remember instances where I knew a movie would come out, there would be a villain, and I knew that the next day, and sure enough, I can think of an exact Batman movie where that next day, that was what the bullies chased me down the playground with. And, I was known as the freak because of how I looked. And that drove me to do extremely painful makeup procedures and laser treatments on my birthmark. That forced me into mental health disparities and peer pressure and just wanting to fit in. Teen years sucked, but they really sucked for people like us. That's just, we didn't have the regular norms of support.
Was there a time in childhood where you felt different? Was there a moment where you were like, you could recognize that? You're like, you know what? I do look a bit different to everybody else in the classroom.
I wouldn't say an exact age, but I mean, I can remember my mom, me being 3 or 4, like young, and I can still remember her being ostracized in the grocery store, or people coming up to her and asking if she needed help, escaping an abusive husband, because clearly this was bruising due to a, attack or something. People would ask if I was contagious, or all these horrendous assumptions. So, I mean, the fact that I was taught early on about the advocacy and education, I wouldn't say there was an exact time. It was more just, yeah, I'm different. So I would notice the stare and start into my spiel because I felt I had to almost protect myself from what was coming.
Yeah, that's awful. I think you just solicitation from other people outside of your own family is just awful. It's like you didn't ask for their opinion, nor do I really want to value your opinion. You're not a doctor, you're not my specialist, and you're not really anybody that I need to deal with. So you speak of advocacy, and when did you start becoming more of an active member for Sturge-Weber syndrome? Was it when during your teenage years, or was it as you got older through school that you started developing this passion for advocacy?
Well, I love to share my story with people that actually, took the time to know. But For the advocacy aspect, I'd probably say young adulthood. I started to be out on my own and doing my own thing and adventuring, and you'd have to deal with these people staring and gawking, or you'd start a new job and have to explain to people, yeah, I'm different, but I'm okay. I don't have any work restrictions. There's no, issues with me other than how I look. Um, but my big advocacy jump would probably be after my first daughter was born. I don't know if it was the postpartums, what kicked in, but I started to see the world as a mom, and I started to take note a lot on the social media feeds about parents that were just starting to be, they just had a child born with a condition, or something like that. And I would start commenting on the feeds, and that led to, okay, well, as a mom, I can understand that, how scary that would be, but educating them, letting them know that, yeah, Sturge-Weber has some scary stuff in it, but it's going to be more of the getting them through the everyday that's going to be the struggle for you. Yeah, surgeries are stressful, but it's going to be that everyday barrier, those social inequalities, those moments where you think, my kid will be fine in school, and it turns out they're not. It's, being that extra parent, that extra special needs parent that, it takes to raise a child that's different.
So going back ever so slightly, I acquired my difference, and I know you were born with yours. At school, I mean, social support system in terms of friends, but what was the support structure like at your school or a school system around you? Was there the facilities and resources for you or your parents to access, or was that kind of not existing at that?
Non-existent for me. There, like nowadays, I see there's incredible support systems for students that have neurodivergent issues, autism, all of that. It's great. I have a niece and a nephew. One has autism and one has cerebral palsy, and I see all the incredible resources that my sister can use in her school, and I'm happy knowing that those little ones are okay. But growing up for myself, there was nothing. I could reach out to a teacher and talk about bullying or the struggles that I was having, or teachers would notice and they would take the pity route and go, oh, well, if you want to stay inside and, color instead of dealing with the bullies, you can, but nothing was ever really dealt with. Even onto that, there was a really bad instance in middle school where I had a group of girls that started a club called the Chelsey Haters Club. And, the girls were horrible, shoving things in my locker, writing evil notes on my textbooks, whispering things about me, but making me feel so non-included at that point. They were actually pulling the couple of students that were kind of friends for me away, and I had nothing and no one. And just that disparity in itself, it was eye-opening to see, yeah, I could be resilient, but why did I need to be? It was a struggle. Yeah.
I think those visible differences, we're often told that we all, oh, you have such great resilience, and it's great, and it has helped different aspects of life, but we didn't deserve that in childhood and as teenagers. Like that wasn't like a forced skill upon us, and I think that it was almost like a trauma coping mechanism rather than a developed skill at a young age. Like now, like into adulthood, we were used to being ostracized and just daily remarks, to the fact that now it's not me personally like blunted my responses, but people say it's a positive, which some aspects it is, but in other aspects it was forced upon us. We had no other choice. It was either that or run and hide, which I think people like us don't deserve to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I often
So
say it was, we were forced to the shadows and we had to peer into the windows. We were never invited to the party. We peered through the windows at the party. So it was having that non-existence of, yeah, it would be nice to say I had a normal teenage upbringing, but I didn't. It was different. It was, yeah.
did you have friends when you were growing up that accepted you for the way you looked?
I had a couple. My struggle was the couple of friends that I did have were of a different religion. So growing up for me, there was a very big um, wall in a sense. Yeah, I had people that would be friends and talk, but I didn't feel like I could ever be myself because there were certain things I couldn't do around them because of their religious beliefs. So yeah, they were kind in class, but I also knew not to expect them to run over if I had a mental breakdown or, some sort of struggle that I needed that close friend. Yeah.
Was there a moment in time during school or as a teenager growing up that there was a moment where you had to stand up for yourself? Was there a pivotal moment where he's like, I'm not going to hide away. I'm going to stand up for myself and not retaliate, but make a stand for what you believe in.
I would say after that incident with the club, I had a boy in my class that was almost inappropriate in a sense. He was trying to come across very strong that I don't even know if he was actually interested, but he came across that way. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to run and hide. I don't feel I should have to. It'd be nice if I had some interest from a boy, but not in this extent or this way. Um, and that's kind of when I showed up to school with a couple piercings in my upper ear, which was so not okay in the school that I went to. And, ripped jean jacket vest and made the whole punker look vibe, asked my mom if I could go get a tattoo, which of course she turned me down then. I got them afterwards, but um, tried to build that tough physique. This was right when like Linkin Park was coming out. And oh my gosh, I fell in love with that band and it was perfectly timed. So here I'm jamming to this heavy rock every day in my Discman now that I've aged myself. And, you'd go to school with this ego of, yeah, talk to me and I'll crush you kind of a thing. But it helped me because I could just walk up to someone and tell them off and be like, I'm sorry, but unless you're actually going to treat me like an equal, I don't want to even have to deal with you. And I'm happy to go and talk to whoever I have to at the school, but I'm not going to get ran over anymore. And kind of I built on that. And as I got older and older, right up to grade 12, I was the senior. I respected you if you respected me. But if you cross that line, run.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, so, with Friendship Grove, and you said with Lincoln, I love Lincoln Park. They got so many bangers. They got so many bangers.
Yeah.
So Chelsea's finishing up teenage years. There is stage. I know it's common in society for girls, some guys to wear makeup at school. Was that something that you did, or a friendship group, or certain people were like, "Oh, you should try this, or you should try that"?
I had girls in my class, kind of tell me that, oh, I should be wearing eyeliner and mascara and trying to make myself look pretty, or, is there a way that I could find a makeup that might hide something? At the age of 16, I ended up going down to Boston to the Sick Children's Hospital there and started having laser treatments there through the Shriners organization. When I was there, I also got a consult for this incredible makeup, which was like special camouflage, like the type of stuff they put over tattoos. It worked. It was probably an hour process. You could put it on, cake it on, you had the concealer and oh, good heavens, it was a process. I dabbled in it. I wore it a couple times when I was featured in a play. I wore it to my grad photo shoot, certain things, but I never loved it. And even worse, when I would look in the mirror, I was so disassociated with that person that would look back at me that, like, to this day, I hate my grad pictures because of that makeup. I looked at that girl and I went, well, you still got the kind of mutant eye going. You got the puffy cheeks still. It didn't completely take everything away and it didn't make me normal. But I said, even the fact that I look kind of more normal, I don't want to look kind of more normal. I like my uniqueness. My birthmark is as unique as a fingerprint. There is no one on this planet whose birthmark looks like mine. And that's kind of where I started thinking in my head, really, my birthmark is my first tattoo. Fate designed it. Like, there's a reason I walk this earth this way. I don't want to hide it. And that's kind of when I stopped with the makeup. A little bit of eyeliner, a little bit of eyeshadow, a little bit of mascara if I wanted to go totally fancy. But that was I'm pretty, deal with it. And that was my makeup. Yeah.
No, I love that confidence. When it comes to makeup, it's so funny, right? Because it's so normal. It's so normal. And, and there's more men wearing makeup, which is, if people want to wear it, that's great. Do what you want to do. But I think when people force makeup on you, like as a guy, the amount of times I walk through a mall and my wife is, she's looking, and people come up to me and be like, "Oh, do you want to cover up the side of your face?" And I'm like, for years I just, threw it off. But now I'm a bit more like, "Oh, we'll see what it looks like." But like you said, like, it's so unique. I want to show it off. So Chelsey, growing up, like photographs, you mentioned, at school and things like that. Did you hate being in photos? Did you enjoy having your photo taken?
Depended on the day. To be honest, I was more annoyed with my hair back then because, as you can tell, it likes to do its own crazy curls. photos for me, I knew the value of them. I would happily take pictures with family, and um always get my yearly school pictures. And I was, so loved at home with my family that, I remember my grandmother being so excited every Christmas. She'd get me and my siblings pictures, school pictures, and she loved them. And so, I mean, I always grew up with a positive, and I think that's actually what's helped me now with still being on social media and doing all the selfies and things, is I have that appreciation and that love for taking a good picture. Ooh, I got the lighting right, or ooh, my hair's matching this, or, I don't know. I've always kind of been, the only time I struggled with the pictures was with the makeup. Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's so refreshing to hear someone that has a similar perspective. My parents and at school, photos were one thing, but I used to have photographers and people say, can I remove that scar off your face? And even at my own wedding, like I look over at my wall and there is, I think, 2 photos out of hundreds where you can actually see my face because you get so used to hiding it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's with me, it's on the side. So if it's one side, it's, I always that joke, one side's better than the other. But I just got so used to hiding it, which was, looking back, not healthy. So you mentioned the bigger organizations, they force representation in terms of like the villain approach, Netflix shows, like even YouTube TV programs. I saw an advert last night where all the villains and the aliens all had like scars, burns, marks. And it's just, it's crazy that it still happens in today's world. Do you feel like some organizations are selling our faces in terms of forced representation?
Yes. To put it bluntly, yes. I'm all for getting us out there. Facial differences, education, advocacy, definitely. But for example, I know I have been bypassed a few times because, I have the lazy eye. So I'm maybe not as photogenic as someone who might have a cleft palate, or that might have a birthmark that's, their eyes both match. Um, I find that, yes, they want the prettiest looking difference, as oxymoron as that sounds, but they also want it to be, big enough and exciting enough that it's going to get them those donor donations or that extra bit of limelight. And, from a business sense, I understand where they're coming from. But in a philanthropy sense, I also go, you're missing a giant chunk of community just so that you can have the couple people that look okay. You're kind of destroying the whole methodology behind what you're trying to capture. It's frustrating, but I also feel that's where we're jumping into this now, and we're starting to share our own stories and being like, fine, you know what? If you're not going to do it, we will. And, I'm finding more people are actually getting out there and getting more of us represented because of that. Yeah, see what we can do.
Yeah, I agree. There's HR industries and other nonprofits as well as organizations. I know in the UK where I reached out to and I was like, hey, like I could offer
Mm.
this, whether
Yeah.
it's not a symposium, but like just a consult or go over some HR training to include. Because I don't know about you, but every HR training that I've ever been a part of, and I've sat through my fair share of hours of,
Yeah.
policies, procedures, and how we talk to people, which, a lot of it is very educational. But not once have I ever seen anything related to those with visible differences. So, going off that, what does real representation look like to you?
Oh, well, in terms of facial differences, it's having every kind of difference out there. It's not just having the aesthetically pleasing or the more acceptable stories. It's sharing everyone. Just like right now, I realize there are trending groups when it comes to HR. Like right now, we have certain populations that are trending. That's great. But at the end of the day, we need to have, it's the whole table ideology. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. And, we all deserve to have our voices heard. So it's having the opportunity to, especially lived experiences, sharing everything, getting it out there, letting people see that, yeah, guess what? The year is 2025, yet women with facial differences, men with facial differences, we are still experiencing such horrible discrimination and stigmatization and biases and stupid everyday microaggressions in our interactions and things that don't need to happen. If we are supposed to be so inclusive, we're not.
No,
I feel like sometimes my kids know better than grown adults, and I go, that is not okay.
no, I totally agree. there's some things that I've been told, which I think I'm pretty sure that's illegal. And I touched on that in my last chat with Andy with career fairs. So related to that, job interviews, job searching, you know, even working on the job. How has that been for you? And how have you found that maybe from growing up into now in this stage of your life?
Well, I get the whole job aspect, from interview on can be stressful for anyone. But for anyone with a facial difference, we have our own form of discrimination that has not even been touched on. I know I've applied for jobs before. I know I've spoken to the managers or HR department, and they've been very positive, making it sound like I might actually be their number one candidate. But the minute that I walk into that interview, and the minute that their secretary or the HR manager or whoever's interviewing me makes eye contact with me and notices my face, I have literally watched a 180 happen in their face. And, you literally can see it. And I've watched it. Their eyes just quickly look down. It's that awkward, oh crap, I look too long. We've all experienced that awkward glare or stare. I've answered the questions. I've answered them great. I think back and I've gone over stuff with my husband afterwards and been like, yeah, he's told me, oh, you did wonderful. You'll probably hear back. I've been ghosted. I've been called and told that the job's been filled, only to watch the posting go back up. I've not gotten the job. It's been heart-wrenching. I've had people ask me about my face in an interview. And, it's only been until recently with more of the DEI aspect and my personal training that I've kind of learned to be like, okay, answer what I feel comfortable doing or answer what I respectfully want to answer. That's not part of this job. And me as a candidate, that does not affect how I work. So it's bittersweet. I know working in the workplace has had its biases as well. I used to work in healthcare, and you would have medical professionals walk up and ask you about your face to see if it was something that they could help you with. To be like, I'm at work right now. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm not a patient. ID badge is right here. I'm trying to work. But in the same regard, healthcare was also more understanding. I reported workplace bullying in another organization, and after that, I was actually fired because I reported it. They played it off as the employee that I was filing it on was actually doing nothing wrong, and I was making a lot out of nothing, and it led to a professional improvement plan, and then that was actually thrown back at me. And before I knew it, I was being handed termination papers on a random Thursday morning. That was probably one of the lows, and I actually touch on that in my book. Just the animosity and the mourning of a job because you think, you've made it, you're kicking butt, you're doing this, you've been there over a year, just to have it turn around and slapped in your face. It is, no pun intended. It's these workplace inequalities that still aren't being dealt with properly. And that's where I think HR needs to get better training, especially in the terms of facial differences.
Couldn't agree more. I think HR has a lot to learn from, and I hate to say people like us,
yes,
but it's true because
yes.
it's just been discredited for so long, and there's zero. I know Face Equality have started initiatives to try and get into, and I know it's going in the UK, and hopefully that expands, gets bigger. You mentioned it, and I wanted to bring it up. Your book, amazing. You're an author. Like the time and dedication to do that as well is just phenomenal. What was the moment where you were like, I'm going to write a book?
Oh, I would have been probably a teenager. I have loved writing since, I used to write in a journal. If I had an emotional day, I found writing poetry kind of calmed me down. Writing about an experience, I'd go back. Certain parts of my life, it just, you wrote it down because you knew you were never going to remember it in that detail 20 years later. And I'm so thankful that I could go back and kind of be like, oh, I'm so glad I wrote this down. But yeah, I have to say in my teenage years, and then I kind of revisited it over the years, and I would keep having people ask me, you have such great stories, Chelsey, why don't you write stuff down and make a book? And I'm like, well, because who has time to do that? Well, apparently a mom slash university student slash wife slash dog owner slash advocate slash whatever had time somehow to do it. I don't know when I slept, but yeah, got her done.
No, I think that's amazing. It's permanent as well, right? That book will last forever. And I know it's two sides to a face. It is. I think the title as well is very poignant. I think there's stuff in there that everybody can learn from. Is there a section of the book or takeaways from it which you feel that were quite hard to write about? Was there anything in there that during the time of writing you were like, well, this is tough, but I need to get this out there?
There was a couple spots. I go back into discussing like when I was having the laser treatments done, and that was very hard. I had them started when I was young, and then kind of kept revisiting due to peer pressure and social inclusion and, wanting to be pretty. Um, I actually spent September 11th, 2001 down in Boston with I was in the airport that day. That I touch on that in the book because for a girl that's 16 years old and she thinks the world is ending, I thought, okay, this is it. There's going to be the world is ending and I'm going to be nowhere near my family, and it was a crazy week to say the least. Um Other than that, probably the chapter where I talk about my dad passing away, because for anyone who's experienced parental loss, you don't know what it's like until you have. And I think that's kind of the other piece that drove me to write this book, was just that sense that, nothing lasts forever as much as you want it to. And writing that chapter, I was still in mourning. I mean, it still gets me. But um having to start to learn to advocate without my biggest cheerleader, that in itself, it hits you. And it's learning to kind of keep going and doing it for your kids and doing it for the community, but also knowing, you won't have that person to lean back on anymore. Definitely. Yeah.
Do you feel pressure being the quote unquote strong one? Do you feel pressure from that in today's society?
Oh, yes. I would love to have a group of friends that I could go and, kick back and watch a football game or go out for a thing of beers and just feel regular. But because I'm so different, that never really happened for me. So instead, I am the matriarch of my family. I am the um, strong community member, advocate. I do all this stuff, and then it's kind of like I just crumble into myself when I need to. But it's, always taking care of yourself, being the mother and trying to help everyone and remember to take care of you and, all of that.
Yeah, no, that's so admirable. Like, because I think my wife is great, but it's just us, and taking care of us and taking care of myself is sometimes that's hard mentally as well as physically. But to have the family and the dogs, and I just think you're amazing. Self acceptance. I still struggle with it sometimes. How has your journey been towards self acceptance? And, I know you mentioned that you were strong and sometimes at school you put on that persona, be confident. But, and I went through that on a tennis court, in the school environment and at college. But it can be exhausting
Yeah,
sometimes. And then the time you let down that curtain, you're like, you know what? I'm going to accept it and we're going to move on. How's that journey been for you?
definitely not an overnight battle. It's definitely taken a few years. To say that there aren't days you want to just stay inside, put on your jammies, watch movies, or cry over a good book or whatever and have your mental health days, those are allowed. But it's also, for example, I have two daughters and I want to know that they grow up to be as confident and strong as even a little bit that I am. So I want them to see mom in action and the role model that I, have worked so hard to be for them. I also know that, by doing that, so many parents have reached out and said, well, my daughter, I've shown her your videos, I've shared her stories, I've read your book to her, and I get to be that big sister, that I know my sister looks up to. And that's kind of helped me along the way. And that's helped me with my insecurities or bad times, because I know, like I said, my birthmark is my first tattoo. So it's here. It's here permanently. Even if I went and got repeated laser treatments on it, I was told it would never 100% go away. So I went, and that's kind of when I decided, why am I going through all these sessions of pain and discomfort to make everyone around me comfortable? If I'm already kicking butt at this and loving myself for who I am, there's no point. It's just getting to that point where, yeah, I'm going to have to deal with a couple looks, but that's where I jump into the advocacy piece. And it's also that big chunk of, self-love. It's reminding yourself that I guarantee you there is no one on this planet. There might be people that look similar, but there's no one on this planet that looks like me. And I take that with pride, that whole cookie cutter aspect of everyone wanting to look the same. And I go, I'm the complete opposite. And I'm proud of that. I'm happy to be me as I am.
I think we're all born to stand out, born to be
Yeah.
different. And it's boring fitting in. It's so boring. You see, I'm not sure with your daughters, but my wife, who's a teacher, like the kids at school, just like they all want to do the same exact thing. And it's just like, that is so boring. So how do you see the overlap between facial equality and broader disability justice? Like, where do you feel the conversation still needs to grow?
Well, disability is definitely making more progress than facial differences. But that's where we just need to get ourselves out there more. In terms of equity and equality, we need to be there, even if it's under the umbrella approach of disability, for example. But as long as we have some footing or some chair at a table, because again, people can listen to our stories, think we're amazing, be like, oh, you're so motivational and resilient. And I go, that's great, but that's not changing anything. I need you to look at me as you would any other individual with experiences like mine, and know that when I'm talking about workplace biases or societal microaggressions or inequalities that we are still experiencing, we can stand there and be like, give us a chance to help you fix this for the better. And until we start doing that, we're going to just be the oddities, the circus shows, those, ooh, look at that cool episode of whatever. That's great, but that's not going to get us anywhere.
I know Adam Pearson in that movie that he just appeared in.
I
It's a
just
huge step.
watched that. Oh, I cried.
It's a huge step forwards. A huge step forwards.
Yes.
But again, you still, I go to the mall once every few weeks, and you see the posters at various clothing stores, sporting entities, makeup, and even tech stores. You still, there's great diversity, but you still never see anybody that has a facial difference or a visible difference on there. So I want to touch on this one because this was a poignant time for me. Dating and relationships, when you have a visible difference, how was that for you? Because I know now you're married, but when you were at school, college, and just general life, how was that experience for you?
Well, growing up, you wanted to be pretty and liked by all the boys. I know for myself that didn't really happen. I could reach out and try and be my sweet, cute self with my crazy hair, and it didn't make a difference. Grad, I didn't have a date. There was a couple guys that I chatted with during high school, but nothing ever really serious. And I struggled a lot with self-love in that return because, you thought, well, if the male gender can't find me attractive, it's my fault. I can't make myself prettier. So what am I going to do? I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And it wasn't until, thankfully, I happened to meet my husband at the time and got to actually dating him more. We got to know each other online back in the days of MSN Messenger, now that I'm officially aging myself. But it was spending those hours asking those questions and, maybe not feeling as insecure. I met him once in public right when I first met him. And then after that, it was the online. And I think it was taking the time to get to know the online and not feeling the insecurities and the stresses and the nerves of the face to face. It obviously worked because we're happily married. But I know the facial differences community that's where we need to have more of us out there, because society still is so scared of us because we're still so rare and unique, that I've heard of lots of community members finding partners, and that brightens my day and makes me feel so great. It's better than it used to be from what I hear, but it's still where we need that social identity piece. And, it's the miraculousness of love, hoping you can find someone that will love you as you are. And the magic of it all.
I think the dating scene now is, I would struggle if I was a teenager now, given, it's just so A, superficial.
Yes.
And B, almost seems transactional, right? It's all these filters that you see. And I think folks with visible differences, when you see the filters being applied, it's almost like another slap on the wrist.
Yes. Yes. I have to say that's where that show Love is Blind, if it actually does work, that is what we need more of. The chance to get to know people before you take a look at them. But I also struggle with that because I know, yeah, but how many people would actually stay with that person if the person that walked out had a facial difference? How comfortable would you be? We are so empathetic as individuals, and extra loving and extra emotional because we've had that journey that's been so different than anyone else's. I mean, that's why some of us make such great artists and musicians, and because we've had that emotional realm that is far beyond normalcy. So it makes you wonder. It does.
It's interesting you say that, because I like to think of myself as a very empathetic individual.
Yeah.
Same with my wife.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. That's so true because of what we had to go through growing up, and know and understand how we feel inside, that we don't want others to feel
Yeah.
how we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. What would Chelsey say to her 16-year-old self if you could take her for a walk and a coffee right now?
Oh, if I had to talk to my younger self, I would definitely be giving her lots of hugs because that time was not a fun time. I would just tell her to be strong. Tell her, there's going to be some rough storms ahead, but, don't worry. There's a really cute guy coming. Hold out. He's there. He's got big blue eyes. He's coming. There's a couple really cute kids, and I didn't think I was going to have kids. Growing up the way I looked, I thought no one would fall in love with me and I wouldn't have that opportunity. So to have two beautiful daughters, they are my blessings. Just tell her to hold on and start making the changes maybe earlier that she does, because it's all those little interactions that I seem to have with people, or those moments where I can share a story or connect, that seem to make such an impact. And I don't mean to make such a big impact, but clearly people need to hear what I have to say. So, if I could do that earlier and get that ball rolling sooner and make the world a better place, I'll be happy to know if that's my legacy.
You're amazing. And those girls have such a strong, inspiration and role model to look up to. Who are your inspirations?
Oh, my nana, my dad, several women in the facial differences community, people that are real change makers, people that are comfortable enough to step out of their comfort zone. It's those people that, don't want to just put their head down and follow the grain. They want to jump outside of the matrix and, live their own way. Those are the people that will get my attention. Definitely.
At school and progressing through life, did you ever feel like, I didn't say you don't fit in, but did you ever question that, because I know there's a huge mental health crisis, especially with women and young boys at the moment, of like, I don't belong here, and it's very tragic, especially male suicide rates all-time highs.
Yes.
And I know it's quite a loaded question, but was there ever a time when you were just like, I don't belong here, and like, I just don't, not that you don't see a future for yourself, but you were questioning, like, I don't belong here.
Yeah. Age 13 to 15. And then actually another time would have been right when my hubby and I had our first big major fight. And after that, I thought we were over, and I thought I was over. And, that was probably the most normal I ever felt, was the fact I was like, I'm going through heartache. That's normal, but it's not. And I'm like, I'm such a weirdo. And oh yeah, the struggle's there, right? Heartbreak, I tell you. But the 13 to 15-year-old was a girl who, again, didn't fit. My parents weren't wealthy. I couldn't get the fashion trendy things. I didn't have the hair that was straight of the 2000s. I didn't fit all the social realms of normalcy. So for me, I drudged to school every day. I sat there half paying attention and kind of lived with my head down and my headphones on. And right then, thankfully, I found the right music, because it just seemed to keep me going. And I lived through music. Music was my therapy. And as someone who loved to sing, I would come home after a horrible day, shut my door, turn on Linkin Park, turn on some of that heavy metal, and scream it out until I had no more voice, because I knew at least my energy was going to something. Scream it into my pillow if I had to while I cried. And There's days I still don't know how I made it through, but I did. And I'm thankful that I did. And, it's knowing when to seek help when you do, when you get that low. Definitely.
Mental health nowadays,
Mm.
challenges, good days,
Yeah.
bad days. We all have,
Oh,
our
yeah.
good days and bad days. And I think the bad days can be exaggerated, especially when you live with a disability or a visible difference. What do you do to help your mental health and on those, rougher days to make yourself feel a bit better?
Play with my kids, spend time with them, even if it's playing a round of Mario Kart and I know I'm going to get whomped at it because I'm rusty as heck. It's playing with my dog. It's turning on some music and jamming. It's journaling. It's writing, especially lately now with all my writing. It's, taking that time for you, but it's also reminding yourself, definitely getting off social media because that never helps. And reminding yourself your importance and, going, yeah, there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be days that just aren't as bright as others. Just, go to bed, get up. It'll be so much better tomorrow. And, especially the last couple of years, the struggles that I've had, I can say that for a fact. There's going to be a lot of rainy days, but hold out because the clouds do move and the sun comes back out. And sunburn is proof you will get through the storm. You will get through the storm.
That's so nice to hear. My last guest had a question for you, and something I'm going to start doing is if you had a billboard the world could see, what would be your message?
Don't let your differences divide you. Instead, use them to educate and enlighten.
I like that. That's very nice. And advice for, if I had someone to look up to who had a large scar down the side of their face and they could say to me, hey, it's going to be okay. Like I went on your typical Google searches and YouTube videos, and I think YouTube was around when I was growing up, but I know I don't
Just
want to age
starting out.
myself.
Oh,
What advice would you give to younger folks and even folks similar ages to us who may struggle with their mental health or aren't doing any advocacy work and are just are sat at home and they might see things like this online or things on Instagram and they're maybe a bit nervous to like speak up and stand up for themselves and yeah.
never feel you have to stand up and advocate. Some of us, we like our voices heard. Some of us are happy just to cheer from the sidelines, and that's okay. That's still being an ally and a community member. I will happily share your story for you. I will happily cheer you along at whatever level you choose to cheer or, communicate at. Um, Remember to keep smiling. You're going to have, different days, but you have to remind yourself the reason that your days are so hard are because your journey is not the same as everyone around you, especially if you're born with a disability or a difference. You are a pioneer. You are empowering. You are enlightening. People take one look at you and they actually get to see what true beauty is because ours aren't manufactured. Ours are naturally and genetically made sometimes, and sometimes they're acquired. And in both cases, they are beautifully unique and beautifully you. And that's what makes you and your story so wonderful. Take the time to, when people ask, as long as they do it in a respectful way, educate, advocate. Know when to stand up for yourself, though. Never let that line of respect be crossed. Love yourself like your number one fan chooses to love you. And everyone has a number one fan. They may think they don't, but I guarantee you've got someone that is cheering you on from the sidelines or the shadows somewhere that is, helping you every day to get as strong as you are and empowering and as bright. And, I'm here today because of my couple of fans. So it's staying positive. Yeah.
For the next guests on the show, what question would you ask them?
Oh, what is something you could do to change the world for the better?
I start thinking about that myself. But I'm hoping this podcast and this show is something that, starts that journey.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Goodreads, which is like it seems to be the easiest way to find people. I'm also on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I think there's links on all of that for my book. And connect, reach out. I'm more than happy to chat with everybody and anybody. So,
well, Chelsey, thank you so much for sharing. Like, you're an inspiration. The fact you're doing this with the daughters, the dogs, it's just you're incredible. and I love your stuff on Instagram, and I've learned so much from you. And it's because of you as well that I've had the courage to start this, because, using my voice and my visible difference to make a difference is, yeah, I didn't think I'd ever be doing something like this, but thanks to you and your, motivation and persuasion, I was like, I'm going to do it. So here we are.
You're
So
rocking it.
thank you so much for being on, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you.